It's an enormous honor to be here, and especially at UCD that has produced so many extraordinary scholars and citizens. So thank you for inviting me to be among your company. Yesterday, my husband and son and I had an opportunity to recall the history of Ireland by going, it was a visit to the Parliament, the day up. And we saw so many things there that reminded us of the struggle for independence of Ireland and for the Civil War, the heartbreak and the bloodshed of that. And to think of Ireland having somehow transmognified itself into an extraordinary, vibrant, and prosperous democracy, it's very moving and a model to the world. So actually, I'm in the middle of studying another new, strange civil war in the United States. You know that we, in the mid-19th century, had a massive civil war where the South tried to secede from the North. The issues were, of course, different, but I think we are in the midst now in the United States of an unprecedented kind of rupture of a new sort. Not only in the last 30 years has there been a growth of our right wing. Right and left mean different things, but what I'm really referring to is a rupture between a whole sort of mainstream political body that may disagree about what the government should do, but think there should be a government, and an increasing right-wing group that feels that actually we don't need a government, just a military and a few police, but really 85 to 90% of it, get rid of it and we'll be fine. And they call themselves the Tea Party. So it's created a new polarization. Not only do left and right now listen to different television stations, CNN or NBC on one side and Fox News on the other, there is a new book out, The Big Sort, that tells about how when people move, it's not just to better jobs and cheaper houses and nicer weather, but to politically compatible communities. So we're living differently, we're enjoying different sources of news, we're more separate. Thirdly, there's a hardening of positions. And political belief is a little more like religious belief. A study that was done 30 years ago asked people if Democrats and Republicans, if a child of yours was going to marry a member of the other party, would it disturb you? Well, 3% were disturbed on the Democrat side, 5% on the Republican side. It wasn't a big deal. But recently, that same question was asked, and it was found that a third of Democrats would be disturbed, and over half of Republicans would be disturbed. So there's a kind of not only more separate into poles, but there's a hardening of positions. So, yeah, there are times when it may look from here, and it looks to us there, like we're in the middle of a comic opera. Of the top 12 Republican candidates for the US president, 3 absolutely reject the idea of evolution, and no one of the 12 unambivalently embraces it. Jeb Bush has said no, he believes in the principle of Darwin and evolution, but he doesn't believe that children in schools should learn about it. So if we go to global warming or climate change, we find that of the 12 top Republican candidates, 6 straight out deny the role of human conduct in exacerbating or creating global warming. 5 say the science is unclear, and only one of the 12 says, yes, it's real and we should take measures. And then we come to Donald Trump. Who thinks that one of the major issues in this race for the presidency is whether or not his hair is real. Some claim it's unreal to pay others that it's real. And he's resolved this vital matter by telling a woman to come on stage and pull his hair to see if it's real, and finally by deciding to wear a cap. So it has elements of comic, tragicomic drama. I'd like to enter into the question of why he is the leading Republican candidate, 36% in the United States today. What's going on? And I'd like to invite you to join me in a journey, both geographic and sociological, to a place some 7,000 kilometers to the south and to the west, to the south of the United States, and to a state, Louisiana, between Texas and Mississippi, that used to be cotton fields and sugar fields a century back, and is now a center of the petrochemical industry and the fracking revolution. So it's extremely polluted. And yet, of course, the people there don't believe in regulating, big bad government regulating polluters. So what's happening? I invite you to this ethnographic journey, and to do it, I think of it as taking off my own political moral alarm system so that my own values don't get in the way of trying to understand another person's. And I take you to the office of a woman named Mary Beth Boudreau. She's white, she's 61, and we're in the office of an accountant. There are very many tax forms on her desk because she's doing favors for people. The cleaning lady, she's doing her tax reforms for free, and there's a laborer, she's doing his. My first registration, she's a nice person. She's a giving person. There is a collection of some dozen elephants to the side of her office, red, blue, white, and blue. They're big, small, some are moving, some are stationary, all representing the Republican Party. And one of the first things she'll tell you is, so you can tell I'm a Republican. But she's not a Republican like other Republicans. So at first she tells me that she's the 4th out of 6 children. Her father was one of 10, mother also, met dozens of cousins on both sides. And her father worked as a pipe fitter in a petrochemical plant. And she's very proud of him, and she's very proud of the fact that she swept the church from age 8 on, never stopped working, and put herself through university. So we've met someone. She seems to you intelligent. She seems about many things. She seems lucid. You can argue logically. She accepts the differenceness of you. She knows you don't agree with her. You come from, say, Berkeley, California, or USC, and she's accepting of that. She's actually helping you do your research. She's inviting you to the Republican Women of Southwest Louisiana, where you meet 6 other people, and you interview them and their husbands and mothers and fathers. You do what's called snowball sampling. So this is Mary Beth. Then you interview her. You turn on the tape recorder. And she tells you what she thinks about a number of things. One, about the President of the United States. The question arises, is he American? And she, now that the long form of the birth certificate has been publicly presented, she says, yes, he's an American. She tells you like that. He's an American, but he wasn't brought up like Americans. And is he Christian? Well, no, he's not Christian, he's Muslim. And how do you know? Well, it was rumored that he took his wedding ring off during Ramadan, when you're not supposed to wear jewelry. So, okay. And then she's telling you about Muslims, that she fears that at petrol stations, most of them work as orderlies in petrol stations, and what if they should refuse to sell petrol? You know, where would America be? You couldn't get to your job. And as for the federal government, she has no use for it. Welfare, no, those people should get to work. Unemployment insurance, no, not really. Paid parental leave, the sort of thing I've called for all my life. No, don't even think of it. So, should the government regulate polluters? Well, no. You have enough regulations and don't need more. That would be simply an excuse for the government to expand its already enormous power. Europe, Ireland, socialist, yeah, and scary model. The United Nations, well, that's too much government on an international level. So you have traveled over 7,000 kilometers to meet a pleasant, normal-seeming, intelligent, friendly woman, and after your first interview, you're confused. And then you go and you interview 40 more people like her, and 20 people who are professionals of different sorts, and you ask them what their impressions are. So you've interviewed over 4 years, 60 people, and you realize that she's not an outlier. Okay. So, okay. Then you look, what sociological theories do we have that would help us get to the bottom of this? Well, there's, of course, the theory of rational choice that focuses on self-interest. And you might say that really Mary Beth Boudreau doesn't want to pay taxes, you know, and it's, who does, but she doesn't, and she therefore builds a rationale that what those taxes would be for would be to go to useless things. So she makes up ideas about how useless the things governments do are, and that perhaps accounts for her critique of government and all that it does. Apart from military, she'll hold on to that. So maybe she's just doing something out of her self-interest, although she strikes you as not a self-interested Ayn Rand, you know, kind of person. But there's a problem with that explanation. After about the 6th interview with her, she says, she confides to you that she actually has an illness, And it leaves her without much energy, and she thinks it's because she lived near the petrochemical plants. But she's against regulating petrochemical plants and reducing pollution. So, and in fact, if you look into it and you compare the red states, as we call them, the Republican states, with the blue states, you find there are higher rates of pollution in the red states and a difference of 5 years of life. And in fact, if you look at Louisiana, it's the second poorest state. It has, in the Union, it has more broken families, more more teen pregnancy. It has worse health. It has more high school or secondary school dropouts, and much worse health delivery. So it has all these problems at the same time as it has actually receives more federal grants than blue states or Democratic states. And Mary Beth and the people in Louisiana are against that federal help. The federal help it gets, which is 44% of the whole state budget, it's a lot, goes for hurricane relief and for welfare to poor people. But she's against that. So you could say that that's not quite in her self-interest either, that actually the problems around her to left and right could be helped with some help, but she's not for that. So we turn to a second kind of perspective, which is the manipulation from on top, manipulation from above. And that theory suggests that there's a rich elite group that spend a lot of money to get grassroots people like Mary Beth to agree with them. And perhaps the most powerful example of this in the United States is the oil conglomerate Koch Industries that's run by two billionaire brothers, Charles and David. They run the second largest privately traded company in the United States. They are the fourth richest people in the United States. And this industry has been faulted for being extremely polluted. And after a Supreme Court decision called in 2010 Citizens United, it is now perfectly legal for people to, for for-profit companies to spend limitless amounts anonymously. So you have rich people that have, in this case, an agenda to reduce government regulation of industry polluting. And you have the legal go-ahead to do so. And you have something else in this theory. And that is a sophisticated organization. It's like an enormous company. And in an interview with Charles Koch, he describes his political structure in this way, as like a vertically and horizontally integrated company, spanning from idea creation to policy development to education to grassroots organization to lobbying to litigation to political action. So it's like you own a forest, and then you own the paper mill, and then you own the publishing company, and you own the bookstore, and then you own the author. It's vertically integrated, except it's not a company, it's a political structure with the aim of vastly reducing government function and regulation, actually getting rid of the EPA. Environmental Protection Agency. So this is a powerful theory. Let's not drop it. But it doesn't explain Mary Beth Boudreau. It doesn't explain her. And that's what we want to do. We've taken off our alarm system. We're there. We're trying to really understand her. She's highly intelligent. She can think for herself. She's not a passive. She's not a dupe. So what goes on? We can turn finally to another concept of ideology. And this was a very popular and useful idea, but it suggested there's a coherent system of ideas that is a result of some received teaching. And in the 1950s, the whole post-war period, we had a polarization of, communism as a prevailing ideology on one side and the free world ideology on the other, and it was coherent. It was a conflict, but you could kind of understand each system of ideas. I believe that's fallen apart, and that what we're looking at with Mary Beth is not coherent. Not coherent unless we start with emotion, with the idea of feelings. And what do feelings give us? They put an I in the picture. You're not just looking at information or truth, you're looking at the self-relevance of that information or truth. And if we look at that, a certain emotional logic, I think, unfolds. And it leads us to the idea of a deep story. A deep story. A deep story is an allegorical tale, one that it removes moral judgment and facts. It's a story as felt. And you make it up. And then years later, you go back, you get to know someone, you present it. Hey, is this your deep story? And they say, yeah, in fact, I'd add to it. So what is Mary Beth's deep story? She's waiting in line up a hill. And it's almost like a pilgrimage, at the top of which is a religious icon. And she's patient about waiting. She's maybe halfway up the hill. She feels she deserves the prize at the top of the hill, which is the American dream. The American dream is that things are getting better in your family. If your father had a small apartment, you have a large one. If he had a house, you have a house with a swimming pool. If he rode a bicycle, you have a car. There's an idea of intergenerational mobility, and even for one individual, that you start low and you rise high. That is the dream. So she's moving toward that dream. And as she's looking at it, she notices there are some people cutting in line. She's waiting, she's obeying the rules, but they're cutting in line. Well, who are they? Immigrants are cutting in line. And then there are blacks and women who've been given special privileges in our country called affirmative action, where you're looking at two people of equivalent deservingness and you nod your head to one. That's unfair, she said. That's so blacks, professional women, immigrants, and then public servants. Look at them with their higher pensions. Incidentally, we're keeping the truth out of here. This is this is her conception, right? And with tenure and job security, that these people are cutting in line. It's just unfair, and she's moving back. So she's worked so hard, and now she's moving back. And then she notices that there is a supervisor who's supposed to keep law and order and be impartial. and this would be Barack Hussein Obama. And she says, whoa, okay, so he's keeping the line. And then she says, he's friendly with the people that are cutting in line. He's their president. He's doing for them. But he's not my president. He's not doing for me. In fact, we're not a united country. He's betraying me by honoring those people. In fact, maybe he's one of the people that have cut in line. How did he pay for that fancy Harvard education when his mother was a single mother? I hear that a lot. That's just really, tape recorder is full of that. How did he get there? How did Michelle get there? And I'm not. So so this is what she's feeling. She's very envious of the people who have cut in line and resentful. She's distrustful of the president because he's in cahoots. And then someone in the front of the line, someone with a higher education, is turning around and saying, you're Southern, you're stupid, you don't know anything, you're prejudiced, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're sexist, your opinions don't matter, you're backward. And then she feels like a stranger in her own land. She has worked this hard. These are her honored beliefs. So she has a moment of estrangement. Where am I? Is this my country? And then something very interesting happens. She says, okay, I may not make it to the American dream, but I can find alternate sources of honor. It's honor that lies behind the deep story. What are those alternate sources? Well, she said, I'm well-churched, Pentecostal, 3 times a week and no quitting. So she's very proud to be a religious person, but she looks at all America and it's becoming more secular. A lot of the churches are empty and she's not honored. You people don't believe in science or evolution. And so she feels, okay, that source of honor that she's turned to as an alternative to moving forward with the American dream is blocked. So she says, okay, another source of honor is how I live. I am a clean living, family values person. She believes that sexuality should be confined to long-term heterosexual marriage and everything else is wrong. And she doesn't believe in a gay marriach and many other things. And so that too, she realizes that she's being dismissed for that set of values. So that again is a blocked door to a sense of fallback honor. So she said, work. I have worked my finger to the bone. Other people don't work as hard as I do. I'm going to find honor in my capacity for endurance, for persistence. She never says about my work, it makes a difference in the world, it makes a better world. It might, but that's not what she's taking pride in. And she never says, look, I'm really good at my job. She is very good at her job, but that's not what she takes pride in. She takes pride in sticking with it. And then the government, the federal government, has the nerve to give out money to people that don't stick with it and do that. So that's a third kind of honor she seeks that's blocked for her. She's in what I would call an honor squeeze. And there's one more thing. There is a deep story self, a kind of a stoical self, a self that can really take the knocks. And she's proud of it. She lives in a state where there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of pollution, there's tremendous problems, there's high crime, and she's taken it. It's not been easy. And she sees that very stoical self being dishonored. What kind of a self is that? The liberals will come along and say, well, just fix the problems. Don't take pride in standing with suffering the problems. So she feels even that is not honored, her kind of self. And so she comes to a kind of a moment where she's feeling both mourning. I think a lot of the men I talk to, older white men, Christian men, are in mourning. They're up against a lot of age discrimination too, and they don't dare cry. So there's mourning, and then there's also anger. And it takes the form of almost like hazing. You know, in boys' boarding schools, when new members come, you know, they put them through their paces. Or when you're doing military service and you get barked at by the sergeant, you know, there's kind of a hardening. And there's also a feeling, look, my suffering wasn't recognized. And so I want you to go through that suffering so you'll recognize what I've been through. There's an element, I believe, of that. So there's a kind of a self that goes with this deep story. Now, what have we learned here? We've learned that if we go to the theories we've just reviewed, self-interest, I think in light of what we've learned, we have to add kind of emotional self-interest, that it's a richer concept than is usually looked at. And if we look at ideology, we realize that actually ideology isn't just about thoughts. It's about how you feel about those thoughts. And that with a deep story comes a whole emotional agenda of keeping that deep story going and keeping it true. And legitimating the feelings you have. She isn't just mad at welfare, she feels entitled to be mad at welfare. There's a level of legitimacy in that. And if we look at the theory of manipulation from the top, we can say, yes, there is a very powerful organization here of interest with its own interests in lower corporate taxes and in getting vastly loosening regulation of polluters. But she's attached, Mary Beth has attached her own interest, her own emotional interest to this. And the top is appealing to the Mary Beths of the world, not by the way we usually think, appealing to their racism and their anger and their selfishness. They just don't want to pay taxes. No, it's actually, I think, appealing to their better angels, to their goodness, to their desire for honor, and thwarted as that search for honor has been. So, in relief of that honor squeeze is, I believe, what the Tea Party offers. There's one more factor that I think we have to add, and that is the fact that we're talking about the South. And this is where this big movement is, its center. And there is a tradition of secession and a tradition of hating the big bad North, the federal government in the North. And in a way, one kind of secession has been layered upon another. So that this isn't, the Koch brothers don't want to secede geographically, but they want to secede economically. It's a way, in a sense, a secession of the rich from the poor and for responsibility for social problems of a citizenry. So the South loves the right, and the right loves the South, because those two agendas have a certain consonance to them. So as we return from our voyage to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and take the 7,000 kilometer voyage back to Dublin, what do we take with us? The idea of deep stories as a way of moving into the experience of people who are not crazy and not stupid, but have an emotional-based experience. We take with us the idea that these deep stories are something we hold, and we actively keep them. They're precious to us. And we want to feel what those deep stories let us feel. And we also come away with the idea that deep stories create areas of, I don't want to look at it, I don't want to know about it, I don't want to feel it. These aren't stupid people, they know what's going on, but there are areas that they don't want to look at. And the truth is that everybody has a deep story, and we all have such areas. I think we come away with that idea. Finally, we come away with the idea that deep stories have implicit in them strategies for coping with the next moves of frightening global capitalism. I think left, right, everyone's kind of anxious. Is there going to be a job for me? Are these jobs going to last? Do I have a crack at one? And that there are mechanisms at work, automation, offshoring, that are highly complex, a changing proportion of the total profit made, less of profit in companies go to the workers, so Main Street salaries are flat, and corporate profits have never been higher in the United States. So there are many things happening over the brow of the hill that are frightening to us all. But I believe that the Mary Beths of the world have a strategy for that. It isn't irrational. They say, okay, we're not going to have a extraordinary public sector. We can do without it. All we're going to do is circle the wagons around home and church. We don't need great schools. We don't need great hospitals. We don't need great universities. We just need ourselves, our church and our homes. And then we're going to get on bended knee to global capital. So when petrochemical companies come and they say, we don't want to pay corporate taxes, Mary Beth says, fine, you just come. And when they say, we actually don't want to be regulated very much either, Mary Beth says, fine. I'm a little sick, but fine. So that's, in a way, a kind of a strategy, a sad strategy, but a rational, in a sense, strategy for dealing with the challenges ahead. So we who are equally anxious about that, I think, luckily offer a more beneficial and publicly based kind of alternate strategy for coping with global capitalism, where the rich are not buying their way out of responsibilities for a full citizenry. Rather, I think we turn to a model of good government, supportive of a creative economy and its entire citizenry. A government perhaps more like that results in institutions like the one we're in today. Thank you.